To round out talking about hearing impairments, we're going to look at educational performance, methods, issues, and interventions. We're looking at if cognition and language are intact in most children with hearing impairment, as we kind of saw before. Why are there still significant differences in their educational performance? Because research is showing that students with a moderate to severe hearing impairment um, their educational performance is below that of a typical child. So looking at some of those facts, like what is their educational performance? The average high school graduate who is deaf is reading at an 8 to 9-year-old level. 30% are going to graduate functionally illiterate. And students who are hearing impaired underachieve in the areas of reading comprehension compared to typically hearing students, and the gap continuously widens over time. So why is that occurring? Some researchers have suggested there's an obstructed access to phonological code, meaning less work with phonological awareness kind of skills. They have limited fluency at the onset of their schooling, so they kind of come in already behind the others when they come to kindergarten. They might have inadequate literacy experiences in their early childhood. They already are struggling with this delayed acquisition of vocabulary, even though it's coming. And then maybe even problems with some lower level soft skills. So all of those things are working against them as they come in with their hearing abled peers. So what are we suggesting? How can we help? Because it's just not acceptable. I mean, that's honestly heartbreaking for me to think of somebody who's hearing impaired. So it's a pure sensory disability to be so illiterate and that block them from independence. And so I just know we can do better. I want to believe we can do better. So some things I suggest are combining the basal reader approach and the authentic text reading associated with whole word reading, using phonological instruction that emphasizes visuals such as cued speech and visual phonics. I actually have a video for you to see that. But we know they need to capitalize on their sensory abilities, meaning if they have tactile and visual abilities. They need multiple literacy experiences, including shared book reading opportunities and writing opportunities. Meaning, if you're doing something in a group, we have to make those modifications where kids with this hearing impairment can still be involved in those shared literacy experiences. And then, of course, there's reading recovery programs as available, which is just a one-on-one intervention that's for first graders only. Then looking specifically at writing, what they're doing, what their educational performance is, because we know writing and reading are closely connected. The writing is often shorter and less complex. They tend to make more grammatical errors, including using unnecessary words or omitting really important words, substituting words incorrectly, or even putting words in the wrong order. And then their narratives are usually shorter, they're simple, their sentence structure is simpler. They might be more literal and less figurative or imaginative in their writing. And that all comes back to the language component. And the more you read, the more everything grows, your language, your reading, and your writing. And so it makes sense if that's lagging, that writing would be lagging too. Um, how can we improve writing? Through vocabulary building. And then there's a really neat tool called a story grammar marker and any kind of story builder materials that helps them understand the parts of a narrative, and it's represented visually or tactily, so they can have that reminder of what all their story needs to include. So after all that, reviewing what the research has shown so far, there's kind of two ways you can look at this. You can look at it as the glass is half empty, meaning even with all these changes, after all this effort, there's still this significant gap. They continue to struggle with reading and writing. Or we can look at it as half full. The reality is that what we're seeing, it looks like that they can be remediated. These are things we can address if we choose to. So that's positive. We need to really focus on early intervention. We need to and focus on consistent language development for every student and their appropriate educational programming, which is where you are such a valuable asset in that child's life. And I think that there are times as humans that it depends on the day if we're going to see it as half empty and half full, because it is hard, some of the realities and the truths that are present right now. But we do have to remember we can do something about it. And we can't change, um, we can't be everything to everyone, but we can be something to someone. And so just trying to keep that attitude that we're going to keep going and working with this population. So things that might what do I wanna say? Um, things that are going to impact your educational method is going to be how you choose to provide the language instruction, if there are any educational placement issues, what specialized instructional techniques you use, and then what kind of aids they're using. So if you're doing an oral approach, that's when you're trying to get spoken language and they want to be completely integrated to hearing society versus if a parent wants manual communication, which is integration mostly into the deaf culture and using sign language, or total communication, which is what I typically highly suggest or I'm a big fan of is to try both, give them both opportunities to be involved in both environments because they are both. They should feel welcome in a deaf community and a hearing community. And I think part of what makes it so hard for someone and I this is speculation, I am not deaf or hard of hearing. So maybe I should say what I assume could make it even more difficult is to feel like you don't belong. You're born with this sensory disability, and some people are upset with you for trying to speak, or some people are upset with you for signing. And I just think that'd be a horrible position to be in. Moving on, one of the biggest things across these populations is their use of lip reading. And there's been a lot of this in the media in the past year as that was a concern raised early on with masking is that what about people that depend so heavily on that strategy to understand and communicate? So it's kind of been brought to light in a big way, but I just liked this video from the perspective of someone who depends so much on lip reading and thinking about how intricate it is and all the ways that we can either make this easier for our students or more difficult.